Welcome back to the channel. Today we are axle swapping my 2019 JL Jeep. Let's get to it. So I picked up some takeoff JLUR or Rubicon axles and driveline with the E-lockers and 410 gears. Also have the shafts. I am not sure if they're going to work though because of the fact that this came off an unlimited and I'm just working with a two-door. Also picked up some new wheel hubs. Figured I might as well replace it because some of the parts have been scavenged off all this already. And then lastly, we're going to wire in these E-lockers and some lights with the new 4-gang aux power switch panel. So have I ever done this before? No. Have I taken a lot of time and researched this so I know what I'm doing? Also no. But I have pretty much taken apart everything on the front and back end of this suspension more than one time. The only thing I haven't played with before are the drive shafts, and that should be pretty straightforward. I'm hoping to reuse as much of my stuff as possible, like the brake calipers, so I don't have to bleed stuff. But I have a plan. I'm just going to start unbolting stuff, and we'll go from there. So step one is always jack up your car. We're going to get this thing up in the air. I'll get some jack stands underneath it so we can get the tires off. Once I have that done, I'm going to actually let the Jeep back down so that I can rest the axle on a little trolley I have here and then start unbolting everything. All right, so now with the car setting on its frame, I'm going to start lowering the axle down. Then it's just a matter of unbolting everything, getting the wires for the braking system out of the way, taking off all of the steering components, the brakes, and getting it onto a roller where I can get it out of the way. We're going to put the new one back in place, wash, rinse, repeat. Installation is opposite or reverse of removal, and we're on our way. So the first thing I'm going to do to start is get rid of the sway bar end links, not get rid of them, but move them back up out of the way, disconnect them, and then start working on taking the brake calipers off and getting them hung somewhere off to the side so I don't have to worry about the brakes or bleeding the front brakes. And then it's just really the steering components, getting the shock off and pulling the spring out, and we are good to go on this side. It all kind of just comes apart like Lego. So the brake caliper appears to just be a 21 millimeter. I'm actually going to break these off by hand and then take them off with the socket because I cannot get my impact in there. And then I'm going to try to hang them up off of the frame once I get that done. For a fat old guy with a bad back and a bad shoulder, try to make things as easy on myself as possible when I can. But occasionally, you just need to get out the Nutbuster 2000 and do work. So calipers unbolted, I'm now going to swing it back out of the way and then have to start taking apart this knuckle because that is something that did not come with the axle that I bought. I'm going to have to transfer the rotors and some of these parts over. I'm also going to take a look and see what the difference is here between the Rubicon knuckle, or whatever you want to call it here in aluminum, and the Sport one. Pick which one I'm going to use. I also need to grab the alignment shims out of these. So I am going to start pulling apart the brakes, get them out of the way, and then we'll move on to the hub. So with the brake out of the way, I should just need to crack off this Torx bit that holds the rotor on, and that should allow me to pull off the rotor. I am now seeing the axle bolt still here, which I do need to get, and the washer, but I think that will be the next thing that I need to get off. Probably should have put gloves on. It's maybe too late for that now. Actually, looking at it, it looks like this rotor is captured by the axle nut. So I guess next up is axle nut. Let me go grab some impacts. All right, so this guy appears to be a 36. I'm hopefully going to knock this off pretty easily. I apologize for the noise and if the compressor kicks on. Let's go. Woo! Giddy up. Axle bolt. Still no rotor. Okay. I think maybe a little help with a hammer will get this guy to come off. So after asking nicely several times with the little hammer, rotor still would not come off. Starting to stop. Didn't take no for an answer. Just keep going up in hammer size. Oh, and that rusty crusty sucker is ready to come off. I'm replacing these hubs anyway. They look pretty roached after 70,000 miles. So get that out of the way. I'm going to go flip around, do the same thing on the other side, and keep moving on. What I think we need right now is a time lapse. Get rid of this dust shield so I can remove the speed sensor, tuck all that away out of the danger zone here where I'm working. And that pretty much frees up this side to start working on taking apart the steering. All right, I am going to reach down here. I'm going to pop out this bolt to release the Bilstein shock. Once that is up out of the way, the next step is going to be releasing the steering, also the vent hose for the differential. And once all of that is done and it's on the 4 control arms, it'll be about positioning it low enough to get the spring out, and then basically just dropping the axle out without hurting myself immensely. Almost got it out in one shot. Yep. Just hang out right there. Ooh. On this side, we've got the front axle disconnect system, which is for fuel mileage, but it disconnects the front axle when you're just in 2-wheel drive. But all of this wiring has to be disconnected for it, and I have to move it over onto the other axle. All right. Drag link, track bar, front axle disconnect. That's it. Rolling right along. All right, so now I'm going to take off the drag link for the steering. I'm actually going to leave the tie rod end on to make it a little bit easier to move around, even though I need to poach the shock stabilizer or steering stabilizer off at some point. But on this side, I need to get the drag link off and then start working on the front axle disconnect. Yuppity yup. I actually just replaced this not that long ago. So my hopes are it's not too crusty. I may need to find me some more cotter pins. Okay, a couple different ways you can couple different ways you can knock out these tapered ends. What you don't want to do is take a hammer and bang on it from the top. You're going to mushroom the top of the threads and you will never be able to use that again. You can always go with the pickle fork, but that's going to tear up your grease bag or joint, whatever you want to call it. What I'm going to try to do is the age-old method of hitting it with two hard things. Maybe rotating. And when that doesn't work, you can always put the nut on, protect your threads. And away you go. Need to Hercules. There we go. You can probably just leave this guy hang, but try not to put too much pressure on the ball joints, having it drag down all the time. So, with that off, next up we're going to do front axle disconnect, which is just a couple clips, and we'll get that out of the way. And then it is time to do the track bar and then flip over and go onto the other side. Really not trying to break this connector. There we go. And you're done. And that's actually on the control arm, so that's good. This has actually been a lot simpler than I anticipated, thankfully. I mean, it's pretty agricultural, working on stuff with solid axles. There's not a huge difference between this and a tractor. You're not dealing with independent suspension and all that stuff. You just plop the axle off, and there it is. That's how you can swap so many different things underneath it. So I'm going to go now and get the track bar off and then figure out how I want to eventually slide this whole axle out in one piece. When I was a younger man, I used to do all this with hand tools. So nice, assuming I can get the extension on, to be able to just zip stuff out pneumatically. And there's the compressor. So at this point, everything from the brakes, all the electronics, the speed sensors are all off of the axle. I'm going to drop this down so I can pull the dual rate springs out of there. They should be just about loose now. And then once those are out, it's going to be figuring out how to slide this entire assembly out in one piece without killing myself. Here we go. Really don't want to lose a finger. There we go. So these are our Skyjacker dual rate springs. Top part keeps you bouncing so you're not suffering over all the tiny bumps. Bigger part on the bottom for off-roading. And now that that is out, I see this side is just about free. One thing you want to make sure you do is even if they're factory, I know with these they had driver side, passenger side. The taller springs go on the side that has the gas tank just because it offsets it. Got my breath back. Next up, disconnect the front drive shaft. And then after that, it's time to pull the 4 control arms, and this whole thing comes out as one big piece. All right, drive shaft ready to come out. Not a lot of room here, Jeep engineers. What's up with that? And that'll do it. The plan right now, new microphone location, is to lower the axle down onto this little wooden furniture moving dolly and then disconnect the 4 front control arms and just pull this whole sucker out as one big unit. Yeah. 2 hands. Never to be seen again. Be free. Am I tightening? I need a righty-tighty, lefty-loosey course. I think so. I'm gonna guess yes. All right. Upper control arm. I got a better tool than that. Is it not a 21 on this side? 21. Not a 21. Awesome. Thank you. See if it'll just spin itself off. Would I be that lucky? Nope. All right. Old purpose noises. Hit it again. Ta-da! All right. Hercules. All right, here we go. Somebody went a little crazy on tightening these up. They did their control arms last. Have a talk with that guy. The guy is me, so you know. I'm struggling to use adjustable wrenches. Again. Ow, that hurt. Ready? Not you, drag link. There it is. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a dirty Dana 30, or in Jeep terms, the M186. The 186 is for the size of the ring gear. So the 186 comes out, and the 210, or the Dana 44, comes back in. First, I need to catch my breath, probably change my shirt, and figure out what comes next. So at this point, the old Dana 30 is finally out, or M186, whatever you want to call it. I am going to start working on putting in the M210 Dana 44 front axle. But being that you've seen how all this comes apart, I'm probably just going to throw this up on the tripod and time lapse it so you can watch. I will stop this eventually once I get to a point where I have to start stripping the old front axle for parts to make the new one fit. But other than that, sit back and enjoy the show. All right, back at it again, day 2. Here is the situation. Yesterday was able to get through most of the front axle swap. Got the old one out, have the new one at least bolted into place. But I did not get as much done as I thought I was going to, and my body absolutely hates me today, which is great. I need to get this thing out of the garage today, so I am not going to be able to show you every bolt I loosen. We're probably going to throw this bad boy on some time lapse and watch it go. I need to finish up at least scavenging all the parts off of the old axle, get the new axle all connected back underneath this one, and then at least have the front done before I roll it back out of here, and I'll have to pick up and take the back, do the back later. But for right now, the plan today is going to be I need to get the front axle completed on the Jeep and get this thing out of the garage. Let's go. Okay, that was a fight. I had to pull the bump stops off of the old axle, which was a huge pain in the butt. I then had to reinstall them on the new axle and then get the springs seated properly so I can start buttoning this back up. That was really the hardest part, I believe, of the reassembly process was the springs, just because the dual rate springs are so tall you have to really droop the axle to get it in there. But that step is down. Moving on, moving ahead. Let's start doing shocks and buttoning up all this wiring. All right, the struggle has been real, but I did manage to get the shocks, the springs, the drive shaft, all of the wiring back tucked up under the car and set in place. This seems like a pretty good place to stop for lunch. I'm going to take a break, watch a little bit of the Atlanta race, and then come out here. I've got to scavenge more parts off of the old axle. and swap them over onto the new, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Just lots and lots of bolts I still need to tighten. All right, I will catch up with you in a few. It has been a long 2-day battle getting this front axle swapped out. I thought this was going to be a 1-day job. I was wrong. Update on what I've been up to off camera. I wasn't able to record it. I was just trying to get it done. Was that I was able to strip down the original front axle that came with this Jeep and pull off all of the bolts and the nuts and the bolts, and all of the parts I need to finally finish putting this thing back together. So at this point, it's really just slapping on these last few components. I've got to tighten and thread lock some bolts, and then it will be putting it up on jack stands so I can set the track bar, make sure the steering isn't completely out of whack. I am running out of time. I'm definitely out of energy. I'm just about ready to tap out here, so I'm going to throw this guy on one last time lapse for the evening, and we are going to knock this out finally. All right, so here is the deal. The front end is all buttoned up now except for the steering dampener. Just 3 more bolts. I'm gonna knock those out, get this thing's track bar lined up, and then call it a night. Throw some wheels on it, roll it outside. This has been quite the last 2 days. I'm hoping the rear one goes a lot easier. I don't have to pull anything apart. There's no steering components. Fingers crossed, because this was epically difficult. So as you can see, everything back the way it should be, with the exception of the track bar. I've got everything pretty much dialed in, torque to at least 1 or 2 ugga-duggas. But man, that thing was quite a battle, but it is in, it is locked up. I need to torque down the axle nuts once I get the wheels on and it's on the ground. But I'm going to call it a night, and we'll pick up with the rear axle later. Had the heater running all morning, got the garage nice and warmed up. It is time to finish this axle swap and get the rear axle out and get the new one in. As always, going to start first by jacking up the car, getting it on jack stands, and then assessing the situation from there. So this time we're working on the rear axle, obviously, which I'm hoping is going to be a little bit easier than the front. I don't have all the steering to contend with. Also, I don't have to scavenge any parts off of this old axle to put onto the new one, at least not that I'm aware of yet. Actually, now that I look at it, I got to grab the bump stops. But other than that, it should be, hopefully, knock on wood, pretty straightforward. So I'm going to get this thing on some jack stands, get the wheels off, and then try to assess where to start. All right, so the rear tires are off, the car is up in the air, the axle is suspended. I need to get it to full droop to get these dual rate springs out because they're a little bit longer. That shouldn't be a problem after we get the shocks off. Really quickly, just a quick overview of the different axles you get on a JL Jeep. Basically, you have 3 options front, 3 options rear. In the front, you have this one, which is the M186, essentially the equivalent of like a Dana 30. It's an open differential, comes on the sport models. It is what it is. The other 2 options you get or have, finger in the way, is the M210. Now the M210 is the equivalent to the Dana 44, and this comes in 2 different flavors. You have wide and narrow. The Rubicon, which this axle is the M220 wide. The 220 is for the metric size of the ring gear, if I'm correct. But you also have the narrow one. Those ones you find generally on like the non-max toe equipped Gladiators. And then in the back, you've got 3 options as well. This one, again, is the M220 wide. It's got the E-locker. It's out of a Rubicon. What this has on it right now is the M220 narrow, and it doesn't have the True Lock E-locker. It has the Track Lock limited slip differential. So not a huge upgrade in the back as much as it was in the front. But the big thing also will be the gears, because right now I can't get it into the 6th, 7th, or 8th gear out on the highway. I think the 410 gears are going to help with that. So also back here, not pictured, there is an option for an M200, which is essentially a Dana 35. You're going to get that on the non-LSD equipped Sports and Saharas, the JLs. But all of that being said, it looks like I can keep my brakes and hang them off to the side so I don't have to bleed them, which is awesome. I will need to pull the calipers off of the old, or I should say the new axle. Beyond that, it looks like I've got the sway bar end link, the 4 control arms, and the rear differential, and this guy should pop right out. So I am going to get started, I think, with the shocks. Oh, I also got to get the track bar. There's always more stuff. Get this guy out of here, figure out what I need to poach to put onto the new one. That's just going to be the bump stops. And then start slamming this guy back together. Hopefully get it done today. Then I can move on to wiring up this aux power system to run the 2 lockers and some lights. All right, so I got the parking brake cables, I've got the sway bar end links, and I have the shocks taken off of the Jeep. Next up, I'm going to move on to the brakes. I got to get all the wiring for the brakes, as well as the calipers off of this axle and suspended, so I don't have to bleed anything afterwards, which would be a huge win for me. And then it's time to start doing control arms, track bars, and drive shafts. So let's get to it. So I have already gone ahead and disconnected the shock, the sway bar. I'm going to now work on the brakes. First, getting this little harness here. You can see that, which holds all the wiring for all the electronics and the brake line. Get the calipers off, and then hang them up somewhere here in this rear wheel well. That pretty much wraps up this side. Then it's time to work on the track bar as well as the drive shaft. So I'm probably going to keep you with me while I'm working on this side and then time lapse it for the other side, just so you're not watching me turn wrenches the entire time. Hopefully I have something useful to say, but right now just trying to wrap this up because I really want to take the Jeep out. The weather is getting significantly nicer now. We're supposed to get in the 60s today, which would be nice to open up the door here in the garage. It smells like gear oil, propane, and old decrepit sweaty guy. So getting some fresh air would be nice. Also, started working on the electrical to hook up the aux power 4-gang switch panel, the bullet point mounting solution arm to hold it up in the dashboard is supposed to come today, and I have that pretty much like half wired already. I did that off camera, sorry. But we are moving right along. Where else does this wire go? There we go. Man, so much easier when you turn the bolts the right direction. What a buffoon. Again, this is not genius with the garage. But we're going to get the job done. Get these brakes out, and then I will meet you back on here in a minute. We'll take a look at the control arms, getting those out of the way. Just break these free. Well, I can remember which way it goes. So next up, I am going to pop off the track bar. Once I have the track bar off, it'll be grabbing these two control arms, the upper and lower. And at that point, this side of the axle is already done. So this is going way better than I thought. I thought I was going to have to change the brakes and bleed everything. Right now, I'm probably going to, after finishing this up, go and scavenge a few parts off of the new axle that I need to grab for over here. And then, scavenge them off of this axle to put them onto that axle. I also have to pull the brake calipers off of that guy. But I'll get that done, and then we will start working on installing all this stuff back together. Well, after I do the other side. So hang tight. All right, so I've run into my first problem. If I want to use these rear brakes that were originally on the Sport, these rotors are a different size than the ones over here on the Rubicon axle. I reuse the front brakes from my Sport up front. I really don't know that I want these much bigger Rubicon brakes in the back. I'm not going to be going in and messing around with proportioning. So what I think I'm just going to do is swap the rotors. They're both a M220 axle, so that shouldn't be a big deal. And then just rock the smaller rotors on the back. I don't think I really need them anyway. It's a two-door. Here is a quick situation update. Yesterday I woke up feeling not good. Today I woke up feeling worse. I've been out here grinding on this axle all morning and afternoon, and I'm now running a fever. I have chills, and I don't particularly feel great. I think I'm gonna take a pause here. I only have a little bit more to do to power through and get this axle swap done. I think at this point, I'm gonna rest this evening, get up tomorrow, and see if I feel any better. I got to get this done this weekend, so it's definitely gonna get done. But I am just completely worn out at this point, so I'm gonna call it a night, and I will be back here tomorrow. I don't know how much voice I'm going to have, so we might be doing just some long time lapses with some music over in the background just to get this done. So after a long and protracted battle with the Jeep and Influenza A, I finally got this thing back together. It's sitting on its axles, just a couple things left to button up and torque down, and then it's ready for Moab in a month. But before we do that, let me just give you a quick update on some of the stuff I took care of in between getting very, very sick while filming the last chunk of this and then wrapping it up here today. Doing a quick walk around, you can see have all of the shock, springs, steering, braking, sway bar all hooked up front. Same going back here. Got the original Sport brakes carried over. I ended up not using the Rubicon brakes. All of this stuff is pretty much buttoned up. In terms of the lockers, for that, I built and used this. Not a lot of light up here, but let me grab a light. Let there be light. All right, so back there in the corner, we've got the little aux power, 4-gang power outlet, and then that is getting run inside the cab. Take you back over here. And you can see up top, you now have this 4-gang switch panel that'll turn on the lockers, as well as some lights once I would actually get some lights in here. That's actually going to do it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to Jeff, my buddy, coming over and doing some video and helping me move this stuff around. Next up is back to working on the Volkswagens, a little bit of maintenance and tune-up just for this guy before we head on down the Moab. But thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.